This is a true story, folks. As much as I'd like to be a writer, I am not one. It wasn't until last week that I started thinking about posting my dad's story here. Now, if this is not the correct place to do it, I'd like to know because my father is the best person I know and I want to share his story one way or the other. Spring 2014 is a slow season for my father's business. The weather is nice and the roads are clear, which means slow shifts at an auto shop. It was mid-April around 4 p.m. The wind was pulling in a nice spring breeze when my dad, Bill, was walking along the side of his shop. It happened to overlook a small stream and running trail, which he enjoyed gazing at near the end of his shift. The side of his building ran along the top of a steep hill, which turned into the path. He heard a ruffling in the wind, and about halfway down the hill, he saw a big blue tarp. Being very proud of his business and its appearance, he started to climb down the hill. He was just about to grab for it, about 15 feet away, to toss it in the dump when he saw a car pull into the lot. He turned around and went to help his customer. When 5:30 p.m. rolls around, he closes up and goes home, forgetting the tarp. The next afternoon, Bill is sitting in his office when 3 policemen come in. They asked my father and co-workers a bunch of questions about any suspicious behavior they might have seen. Side note, my dad is extremely charismatic and friendly. He oftentimes talks to people into sharing information with him that they really shouldn't. He looks like someone you can trust, and you can, and he seemed to always have the insider details about things like this. He used his humor to make people feel comfortable, which helped get strangers to open up to him. Anyway, so Bill and his coworker Hank are talking with a female police officer when she let it slip that a body had been discovered just down the hill. "Oh shit, I was just down there yesterday cleaning. I didn't see anyone though," Bill said. "Around what time? Did you happen to see a large blue and white tarp while you were cleaning that area?" She asked intensely. Actually yeah, I almost grabbed it yesterday, but I ended up getting distracted." She asked him more questions about what time, what he saw, etc. when he asked her if the body was found in the tarp. Yes it was. A woman jogging found it this morning around 10:30 a.m. My dad was floored. He was just there yesterday. After a few more questions, the police all head to the crime scene to finish the initial investigation. Nobody was allowed on the scene and the police were asking that passerbys do not take any pictures. Flash forward a few days, the police went back to my father's shop. They noticed the security cameras set up around the building and they were hoping that they might catch something on tape. While transferring the data, my dad started asking more questions about the murder. He learned it was a middle-aged man that had been stabbed to death. Not too much to go on, as it seemed. "Hey, you know there are a couple of meth heads that live in the shack behind our shop, right? It's connected to that bar." Bill started talking about his own predictions for the whodunit scenarios. He continued, "Yeah, we have a lot of problems with them. Stealing scrap metal from the back or letting their dogs run wild and even having him threaten to shoot me once when I was spraying their dogs with water to make them quit barking. You should really check them out." The officer nodded, gathered the rest of his things, and left. "Hey Hank, let's go down there. See if we can find anything cool," my father whispered to his coworker. Alright. I guess it couldn't do any harm," Hank replied hesitantly. They started down the hill where the trench was found. The grass was flat and the tarp was now gone. They walked around for 15 or so minutes when Bill headed up the stream a little ways. The trail runs under a main road and then leads to a man-made lake. Just under the bridge, the water starts to get heavier and the trees are a bit thicker. He noticed a red Lowe's cart in one of the trees. "I'm taking that for the shop," he thought as he ran over to pull it out of the stream. Calling over Hank for help, the two of them pull it out and start wheeling it back up the hill. Suddenly my dad stops. He sees something on the cart. "What is that rusty looking stuff?" "Hank, stop. Look at the cart. Is that blood?" They looked closer and sure enough, it was blood. It was all over the cart, even on the handle, on the wheels inside. But it wasn't only blood they started to notice. There was hair. Clearly human hair. Utterly stunned, my dad calls the policewoman he had been talking to the previous days and explains what they found. For whatever reason, the police department was very skeptical that this was evidence. At first, they didn't even believe my father. When he told them it made no sense to make up, they sent out a car. There were 2 police officers and a CSI. The CSI asked my dad why he thought this was blood. "It looks like blood, sir." "I'm not sure." "How do you know that is human hair?" the CSI asked. "Because it looks like human hair," my dad snapped sarcastically. Why did he seem so hesitant? They used a chemical test and sure enough, it tested positive for human blood. They took the card as evidence and thanked my dad. Again, my dad tried to give his opinion on who the mystery killer might be. He suggested again that, they talked with the crazy neighbors behind his auto shop. Still no information was taken down, and they left with what they had. 2 more days passed. My dad is leaving the shop to get some things from Costco. There was a small dirt alley that leads to the main road, just behind his work. In the past, it had been blocked by one of the meth addicts' cars. They were complaining to my dad and his boss about the business, driving cars back and forth through the alley, disrupting them. He notices it's open and decides to take the shortcut to his destination, but something was off. He saw the usual blocked car sitting in front of the shack. The door was wide open and there was someone sitting on their knees with their upper body inside the car. He got in his car and crept up just a little, so he could see what was happening. He right away recognized the skinny red-headed woman as the female that lived in the shack. It was the shack guy's wife or girlfriend. He didn't know exactly. She was on her hands and knees surrounded with harsh chemicals. Bleach, OxyClean, and much more. My dad said that he knew right then that they were guilty. For one, why would someone be scrubbing their car with straight chemicals? No water, no rinsing. It was the middle of the day on a hot June afternoon. Second, they happened to be only 2 blocks away from a local car wash. He said it felt off and he knew to trust his instincts. She just kept scrubbing and scrubbing the passenger side floor. He pulled out his phone and started recording her. Now he's known this woman and her SO for a few years now. Like I said, they complained about my father's workers and he complained about their dogs on and off for a while. It was all harmless bickering though. My dad, always trying to be the funny guy, yells out his window as he's driving past. Covering up the murder? He laughed and drove away, hearing her say, "Screw you," as he drove off. This time when he called the police, they took it very seriously. He explained that she was cleaning the car aggressively and that it seemed like she was trying to bleach something out of the car. The next day, the police department went by to talk with the residents of the shack. The day after that, they made an arrest. After searching the shack, they found a large blood stain soaked in the plywood floor. Once the blood was seen, the wife or girlfriend crumpled and told the police everything. It was her husband or boyfriend, and the victim. The victim was named Rich. He had gone over to their house to shoot up and get high. Someone ended up accusing Rich of putting some of the dope aside for himself, and things got heated. Eventually, the husband started to physically fight with Rich when he stabbed him. He bled out on the floor and died. They didn't know what to do, so they stole the Lowe's car to move him around, lowered him into the car, wrapped him in the tarp, and pushed his body down the hill. They ditched the car, thinking the river would wash it down far enough that it wouldn't be found. My dad and Hank sat in the car while they watched the police arrest Don, the suspected murderer. He took a video of that as well. You can even hear my dad very inappropriately yelling out his window, "Haha, killer," in the video. My friend Sally has a bad run with the neighbors, but this one was the worst. Sally lives very close to me, about a 10-minute walk. We were both around 14 years old when this happened. We live in a rural area, so we both have a lot of land. Sally and I decided to go camping on our land. We bought cheap hammocks and went through the bushland. The days prior, we spent clearing some of the razor grass with a cane knife to make a path. We probably should have worn long pants because we ended up with little cuts all over our legs and even some on our arms. We set up our hammocks and brought quite a few blankets because it does get pretty cold at night, even though you're sweating throughout the day. We were still on her property and hadn't gone to our neighbor's boundary. Her neighbor had just leased the land to new tenants. Sally and I were sitting on our hammocks talking and laughing. This was around 9 p.m. We heard something in the bush. We just thought it was a wallaby. There's plenty of wallabies around here. Then we could see the figure of a man. We were whispering to each other, trying to see who it was. At first, we thought it was her brother. He came and scared us when we were camping previously. Then as the person got closer, we were thinking it could have been her dad. It was dark and the bush looked the same from every angle. We realized the man was coming from the other direction than her house. We didn't dare move and covered our torches under our blankets. The man came up and said hi and introduced himself as Ben. Now Ben was extremely drunk. He staggered around and he reeked of alcohol. He started saying how we had a nice little camp here and said something pretty unsettling. "I'll have to come out and sunbathe naked here on one of those hammocks." I and Sally gave each other worried looks but didn't say anything. But it only got worse from there. I can't remember everything he said because it was a while ago and he was mumbling on for what felt like forever. But some of the things that stuck out were, "I'll have to kill you guys Wolf Creek style." And he said, "You're nearly legal then," when he asked us our age. Ben was probably in his 40s. I and Sally were texting each other while he was talking and coming up with an escape plan. He also offered us a puff on the magic dragon, his words, not mine, and pulled out a glass pipe. We declined. Sally said that we were leaving back to the house to make food, and he told us to come back. We left our blankets and most of the stuff there and liked it. We told her dad what happened, and we slept inside. The next morning, we went back to our campsite to find everything burnt. A circle with probably a 20-meter radius was all burned. Coming from that circle was a line of burnt grass, going towards the neighbor's house. I'm not a firefighter, nor do I do forensics, but it seemed obvious that some kind of fuel was used. Sally and I were talking, and it dawned on us the possibility that Ben may have thought we were in the hammocks due to the pile of blankets. Ben was definitely drunk enough to not be able to tell the difference. We went and told Sally's dad, who then checked it out and then went next door. Ben's roommate answered the door and said Ben wasn't home and apologized, and even gave Sally's dad $50 for the blankets and hammocks. Nothing more happened for a few months. Sally told me at school about how Ben had been caught on camera sneaking around her yard. I went to her house after school because she was going to be home alone until her dad finished work. I ended up sleeping over there that night. That's when he came over. Ben was drunk and came out the front of Sally's house and started yelling. He accused Sally of stealing his dog. Sally's dad called the police. They arrested him. The next day, we found a knife in the yard. It wasn't from Sally's house. The police came again, and we told them about the knife, and they got the footage from the cameras as well. I don't know what happened to Ben, but he no longer lives next to Sally. So Ben, please stay away from me. When I was about 13, this nice family moved out of their house in the Prescott Country Club, Dewey, Arizona, just down the block from my family. A strange guy moved in, and the condition of the property rapidly deteriorated. The day he moved in, he had a large U-Haul type truck, which was fine, but the thing never left. It stayed parked in the driveway. It also had an extension cord running from the house out to the truck. I thought that was weird. Eventually, there were paint cans all over the yard, random junk on the side of this house, and a real mess. This was not welcome in the small community, but anybody who talked to the guy came away saying the dude was really weird and they needed to tread lightly. I mowed lawns and was hired to do our friend's lawn while they were on an extended vacation. They lived right next to this weird guy. Every day when I was sweating my ass off mowing, I could see this weirdo spying on me through his blinds in his living room. He wasn't very good at hiding it. Every day, I kept looking back at him and giving him weird looks, hoping he'd knock it off. Well, fast forward 2 years and my family is watching the 5 p.m. news while we eat dinner, and they start reporting on a developing case where a woman's frozen body was found inside a freezer, inside a Ryder truck. They showed the house and we were all silent and stopped chewing. I ran outside and looked down the street, and sure enough, every news agency in the state had a truck parked in the street. Satellite dishes extended and cops had everything cornered off. This guy had abducted a 23-year-old woman on a Los Angeles freeway, assaulted and murdered her, and then stored her dead body in a freezer, which eventually went into the truck and was driven to Arizona, where he moved next door to his mother, who of course had no idea. My family owns a cabin in upstate New Hampshire, and it is literally my favorite place in the world. It's on a small, very secluded lake, shared by only a few other cabins. 1 other cabin on my side, and 6 in total. Most of my neighbors only visit during spring and fall months, and even then it's pretty rare to run into one of them. We all pretty much leave each other alone to do our own thing, but we also try to look out for each other the best we can. We will occasionally check in on each other's property during off-season visits just to be sure there haven't been any damages from storms or any break-ins. We all try to be good neighbors because the lake is a pretty popular fishing location in the area, as a result of it being so secluded. It's not unusual to see people who don't live on the lake out in a boat or hiking around with a fishing pole. In the winter, it becomes a popular place for ice fishing and snowmobiling. So again, it kind of reinforces why all of us who own property on the lake try to look out for one another, as there are many people coming and going at all times of the year. There have been a few break-ins on the lake over the years, but honestly, in the 30-plus years I've been going up to the cabin, there have only been a handful. Occasionally, someone's canoe or kayak will go missing, but that's pretty much the worst of it. Until this winter. My wife and I decided to take a week-long vacation at the cabin this winter. She was getting ready to start a new job, and I had leftover PTO from the previous year, so We figured we should take the opportunity to get away before our schedules started to get busy again in the spring. It was sort of impromptu, but once we got the idea of spending a week alone together, relaxing by a wood stove, drinking craft beer, winter hiking, and binge watching DVDs, we couldn't get it out of our heads. 2 weeks later, we were packed up in my father's F-150. We swapped cars and on the road. Things got wacky immediately, but first, there are a couple of things you need to know about this location. The lake sits in the middle of a dead zone as far as wireless reception goes. Sometimes you can randomly get a couple of bars of service, but never with regularity. The isolation and feeling of being unplugged are two main reasons I love going up to the cabin. It becomes a lot easier to not glue yourself to your phone when you physically can. Secondly, as mentioned before, this place is secluded. It's a solid 10-minute drive before cell reception kicks in with any sort of consistency, and about another 5 before you reach town. A couple of years ago, and after much debate within the family, we decided to break down and get a satellite dish installed so we could have some connection with the outside world. We essentially have basic cable for news and weather and a phone line. However, my folks have the service suspended at the start of winter, since our family rarely visits during those months. So my wife and I were heading up without a phone connection, but it had never been a problem before, so we didn't really think anything of it. It hadn't snowed too much in our area, but the ground was still covered in a few inches of old snow, and there were snowmobile tracks all over the place. Before reaching the final turnoff towards the cabin, you have to drive across a causeway, a fancy term for a land bridge. And while crossing it, you get a really good view of both sides of the lake. It had been cold for a few weeks straight, so the lake was frozen over. I looked out over the lake and saw what happened to be two guys ice fishing, sitting on a picnic table out in the middle of our side of the lake. It was my neighbor's picnic table. I knew right away that it was his because of its very distinct paint job. This exact thing had actually happened before, and the last group of fishermen that did this left his table out on the ice, and it fell through once the lake started to thaw. Because of this, my neighbor had chained his new picnic table to concrete footing on the edge of his property, so that means these guys either broke the table to get out on the lake, or they broke the chain. I am also pretty confident that it wasn't my neighbor out on the ice because he lives in Florida, doesn't fish, and never visits in the winter. This pissed me off a bit. I say something along the lines of, "Again? What the heck is their problem?" to my wife, and she reciprocates in a similar fashion. Since both of us were in agreement, I sped up to get to the cabin and confront them before they could run off. I didn't really have a plan, but I figured I would go yell at them and threaten to call the police if they didn't put it back, which I couldn't actually do, I guess. I kind of figured that as soon as they saw the truck turn down the road, they would take off anyway. I was right, but oddly more right than I knew. As I came down the road, I noticed a few things that struck me as odd. First, there were two dudes jumping onto and starting up snowmobiles that were parked in front of my neighbor's cabin. Second, the front door to the cabin was wide open. Lights were on and there was smoke coming out of the chimney. I stopped the truck about 50 feet from this driveway and watched as the two guys drove the snowmobiles out onto the lake, picked up their buddies, and sped off across the lake and into the woods. We kind of just sat there for a minute or so, dumbfounded. I wasn't really sure what was going on, but it definitely didn't feel right. I guess it was technically possible that my neighbor was visiting, or that maybe he rented his cabin out to some people, but my gut told me that wasn't the case. There were no cars in the driveway, and the guys on the snowmobiles were definitely in some sort of hurry when we pulled up. Also, it was like 10 degrees outside, so why would they leave the door open? After snapping out of it, I parked the truck in front of our cabin and walked over to the edge of the lake. Sound travels pretty well out there, and I could hear the snowmobiles getting farther and farther away. I unlocked our cabin, threw a quick start log into the wood stove, and then my wife and I headed over to my neighbor's cabin with our dog. I called out, "Hello," a few times, and then I tried, "Anyone there?" and got nothing back. As we got closer, I could clearly see that the front door was splintered and had been pried open. My wife and I had unknowingly pulled up while people were actively breaking into my neighbor's cabin. Not exactly an ideal way to start a relaxing winter getaway. My family is on really good terms with my neighbor, so I went ahead and stepped inside to check it out. There was a fresh pile of wood by the stove, which was roaring, and the kitchen had some paper plates, food, empty beer cans, and cigarette butts strewn about. Nothing seemed broken or missing that I could tell, but the place was an absolute mess and reeked of cigarettes. It was as if they had just decided to help themselves and make my neighbor's cabin their own private fishing lodge for a while. There were some sleeping bags and a cooler in the living room, so it looked like they had been planning to stay for more than a day. I wasn't in the cabin for more than a minute or so, and I was careful to not touch anything. Did, however, snap a few pictures for my neighbor and the cops, and then I snuffed out the wood stove. I also decided to close the front door the best I could when I left, while wearing gloves, since we were going to leave in order to get in touch with the police and my neighbor, and I didn't want the front door left wide open. The next couple of hours were pretty bunk. We drove into town and reported the break-in to the police. After giving our report, we got in touch with my neighbor, who was understandably very upset. I did my best to assure him that things weren't too bad, all things considered, and that there would just be some cleaning up to do. I offered to do it myself since we were going to be up there all week, but he insisted that he wanted to see it all for himself. He was going to make plans to fly out from Florida to deal with everything as soon as he could, but asked if I could nail a couple of boards across the broken door for now. The police were heading out to check out the property. When we got back to our cabin, the police were already at my neighbor's checking things out. One of them came over and asked if I would walk with them through everything that happened. I retold the story and ended it with something along the lines of, "So I left after shutting down the stove and closed the door behind me. I got some weird looks, and then the conversation was something like this. Are you sure you closed the door? Because it was open when we got there." "Yes, I definitely closed the door." "Well, it was open and the items you described aren't there. The sleeping bags, the cooler, they aren't here. So it looks like they came back and got them." That was pretty unnerving for some reason. Why risk coming all the way back for some sleeping bags and a cooler after getting away? They couldn't have known for certain that we didn't or weren't able to call the police right away. So the cops suspected that they were watching us and came back right after we left, or that there was someone else in the area we didn't see. I listened to the snowmobiles driving off, and they got pretty far away. They kept going until I couldn't hear them anymore, and the woods on the other side of the lake are completely untouched wilderness for a few miles. I know because I hunt turkey out there. So I personally think there was someone else close by watching us. My wife really liked that little bit of information, especially since only a few years ago we had basically been followed by creepers on a previous trip to our cabin. The whole situation was just a giant downer. After a while, the cops finished up and let us know they would keep a cruiser in the area. Not that that would really help, and that they were going to check on the other cabins for any signs of break-ins. I nailed my neighbor's door shut, dragged the picnic table off the ice, they had cut the chain, and headed back inside for a much-needed beer, or maybe 3 or 4. We had debated a little bit about canceling the trip and heading back home for a staycation. But honestly, we were determined to enjoy our week because we had really been looking forward to it, so we decided on staying. The next couple of days were actually great though. We did exactly what we planned on doing, which was mostly nothing. We watched movies, snuggled, and drank in excess. I made my world-famous chili, and my wife ate it. We had bacon, eggs, and mimosas for breakfast, beer, grilled cheese, and mediocre red box movies for lunch, and vodka tonics, hearty winter meals, and sexy times for dinner. It was awesome. Granted, every time we heard a snowmobile, we both gave each other an oh shit look, but after a few times we were joking about it, and our oh shit looks morphed into a game of who can make the funniest face. We were just genuinely having a great time. As much as we were enjoying being completely overindulgent bed buddies, by midweek we wanted to stretch our legs, so we decided to go for a hike. It was actually a beautiful day, and I knew the surrounding area very well, so I suggested we hike up to the dam at the mouth of the river. Stream really. That feeds the lake. It freezes over in winter and looks pretty cool. It was about a 2 to 3 hour hike round trip, depending on the pace. Short and sweet. We brought our dog along, and again we were having a great time, enjoying the extremely scenic winter woods and each other's company. On our way back, things took an unfortunate turn. About 2-ish miles, 30 minutes from the cabin, we hear the whine of snowmobiles. We each made a funny face, joked, and then got quiet and kept listening. They were getting closer. At the time, it wasn't exactly unexpected. It was a gorgeous day out, and we were smack dab in the middle of prime snowmobile territory. But given everything that had happened earlier in the week, it was impossible to not feel a little bit uneasy. Snowmobiles kept getting closer, and the whine was getting louder and louder. My wife and I talked about something, but honestly, I wasn't really listening to her. I was going over this situation in my head, and I don't quite remember what we were talking about. The engine sounds were getting louder, and it was obvious they were coming down the same trail we were on. I suppose it could have been anyone. Perhaps a father and son enjoying the day, or a couple of friends off to meet up with some of their buddies. Regardless, I had a very bad feeling though. I carry, almost as a direct result of the last weird encounter I had at this cabin. So I made the decision to unholster, rack around into the chamber, and reholster, just in case. Not here to debate the pros or cons of guns or carrying +1, but I do what I do and I did what I did, and I feel good about it. The trail we were on was about 5 to 6 feet wide. well traveled. So once the snowmobiles came into view, I picked up our dog. He's a little guy but thinks the planet Earth is his, and the rest of us are just weird tall visitors here to grace him with treats. And then we stood off to the edge of the trail so they could pass us. I think we played it pretty standard as far as general common courtesy goes. As soon as they saw us, they both stopped in the middle of the trail, about 100 feet from where we were standing. I waved, but they didn't wave back. I could see that they were talking back and forth, occasionally looking at us. They seemed to finish up their conversation and then gunned their engines. Both of them started approaching us very fast and appeared to be on a line to hit us. My wife and I stepped back a few steps into the brush. As they buzzed by us at full throttle, I'm talking inches, not feet, they continued to pass us for a bit and then stop and turn to look back at us. I instinctively, almost as a reflex, threw up my free arm, holding a furiously barking Boston Terrier in the other, and yelled, "What the heck is your problem, man?" One of them replied with a middle finger, revved the engine a few times, and then they both took off down the trail. My wife was a wreck afterwards. I was scared, but she was really scared. The trail we were on basically ends where our property begins, so if it was the same people from earlier in the week, they would know we weren't home. We had another 30 minutes of hiking before we got back, and the whole time we could hear the snowmobiles ahead of us. They didn't disappear and get further away like before. The whole walk back, they were completely within earshot. After about 10 minutes, we could hear that they had stopped and then started driving at a low RPM. The engines were running, but not at full throttle. After a few minutes, we stopped and waited. They started at full blast again, this time getting farther and farther away. We waited until we couldn't hear them again and then headed for the cabin. When we got back, there were snowmobile tracks all around the property, out front and out back. They had been circling the cabin. We had no way to call the police, so after an extremely short and extremely tense conversation, we promptly packed up, closed the cabin, and left for home. Vacation officially ruined. We did contact the police, but there wasn't much to say other than a couple of assholes on snowmobiles almost ran us over and then drove all over our property. We may have been more selective with our words. The police were certainly sympathetic, and again, given the break-in at my neighbors, they seemed pretty concerned about it. In the end, there wasn't much for them to do. We gave descriptions, and as well as our info, then left. The thing that gets to me the most is that even though my wife acts like it didn't bother her too much, I know it did. I've been going to that cabin my entire life, and some of the best memories I have are up there on that lake. Now, I not only have one but two terrible and frightening experiences at that cabin, where the person I love the most in the world was potentially at risk. I'd never ask her to go somewhere she doesn't feel safe, and honestly, I'm not sure I feel safe going up there anymore myself. The good news is that both my neighbor and my family decided to have proper alarm systems installed, so at the very least, someone will be alerted to any future break-in attempts. However, it still doesn't help with the fact that when you are far away from help, you are essentially at the mercy of others. I know and believe that the vast majority of people are good-natured, but I'm learning that all it takes is one person, or multiple in my case, to really ruin your day. Last week, my boyfriend and I took a trip to Mexico for our anniversary on the 20th. Let it be known that we speak a fair amount of Spanish, enough to get us around comfortably. We went to many places, and eventually landed to Cancun to hopefully get better beaches without as much seaweed. We took many taxis, many places, and we never had any issues. On our anniversary, Thursday the 20th, we went out and did normal daytime in Mexico things. We then went home and got ready for an evening out. We decided to go to a place called Toro Rojo, because they are known for their super nachos, and boy do I love nachos. So we take off walking because according to the maps, it's not that far. We walk and walk and walk for like 45 minutes, and I checked the time on Google Maps, and it says it'll be another hour's walk or a 5-minute drive. It was a pretty major highway we were walking on. We decided to call a taxi because honestly, I was in a rush for super nachos and stuff. The taxi pulls over to the side and we hop in. We tell him Toro Rojo, and he says he doesn't know where that is, so we hand him my phone with Google Maps pulled up. To get there, you needed to go straight and take a U-turn, and it would then be on the left. So he starts driving down this highway, and I'm watching over his shoulder. We are getting closer to the U-turn, and he does not slow down. We pass the U-turn. I assume, okay, maybe he missed it. I've done stuff like that 1,000 times before. But he keeps driving, and he passes another U-turn, and then another, and I start to worry. I take my boyfriend's phone and type. He keeps missing the U-turns. Tell him it's the other way. In Spanish, my boyfriend tells him to go the other way to get to the restaurant. guy keeps driving faster and faster, at least 40 kilometers over the limit now, and says, in Spanish, my English is not good. He keeps driving and driving, passing U-turn after U-turn, and I finally start panicking. It's hard to breathe when I hear my boyfriend tell the guy, "Here is good." He keeps driving. My boyfriend yells this time. The driver finally slows down and I leap out of the car. The man demands $30, which my boyfriend gave him happily, and we took off sprinting into the other direction. We looked on maps and he took us 9 miles outside of the city, so we are now 12 miles from our hotel. There is nothing around us except blackness and trees. It is 11 p.m. Thankfully, I could call my mom and dad and they talked to us while we walked. We were walking, trying to get ourselves to a hotel so we could pull cash out. The taxi driver took most of our cash and get an executive taxi. It was an hour's walk to the nearest hotel. We were walking and suddenly this red Mini Cooper starts slowly following behind us. They roll their window down and drive next to us, but they don't say anything. At this point, we are so both on edge, and my boyfriend smacks the side of the car and screams to screw off. And they finally speed off and away from us. Soon after that, we came upon 2 stray dogs. My boyfriend mentioned, what if they aren't friendly? And grabbed 2 rocks just in case. This broke my heart as I am a pre-vet, but safety first. These dogs ended up being amazing and only wanting pets, so we pet them for a bit and keep walking. Maybe 20 feet after these dogs, this red truck drives up next to us and asks, "Taxi?" It was an unmarked car, not a taxi, and we tell him no and wave him on. He does not start to drive away, and suddenly these dogs come running and jumping at the car, barking so meanly. We run the other way because I trust dogs' intuition. We finally made it to the hotel and got back to our hotel safely. But frankly, I'd be scared to ever come back here again.